You're watching Breakthrough News.
Hi everyone, Happy New Year's. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and you're watching Breakthrough News on BTR Today. Today we're talking about the atomic lives of our bodies, how we're absolutely chemically interconnected with the planet around us. It's a nice theme for the New Year's, theme of renewal. With me to discuss is Dr. Kurt Sager, professor at Paul Smith's College, author of the recent book, Your Atomic Self. He's also an ecologist and a paleoclimatologist. Thank you, Kurt, for joining me today to talk about this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So you recently published this book, Your Atomic Self, the invisible elements that connect you to everything else in the universe. What inspired you to write this?
It's sort of a natural follow-up on my work. I'm an ecologist, and I sort of follow the elements through living things and ecosystems. But sometimes it's hard to realize that these invisible things are real parts of our daily lives as well. And so by doing some reading and talking to experts, I started to find ways to really bring it down to earth.
To kind of take it out of the cerebral, abstract ideas and actually into your daily experience of your life.
Yeah.
Would you say that it's in some ways a wake-up call to people in terms of the importance of not polluting and feeling a sense of responsibility towards how we treat our planet? But one that is very much in scientific terms about our interconnectedness. Because I think you hear that kind of language a lot, right? But actually putting it in scientific terms is...
Yeah, absolutely. Most of my research has to do with climate change, and I deal with trying to get people to understand that invisible gases that we release when we burn fossil fuels actually affect the planet, but it's hard to really get that because you can't see them. So I kind of feel like this is the step in my outreach and my research to try to, first of all, let myself find out how to do this, but to also help other people realize that this invisible world is real, and it literally does connect us to the entire planet. And literally, the way we live our lives affects people all over the world and the planet itself, and will do so for centuries.
So it's very much about the atmosphere, right? Or is it more than that as well? Or is your focus the atmosphere and this sense of breath and the gases around us?
Well, I started with the atmosphere part. It's about everything from stars to planets to fossils and everything like that. But basically, the atmosphere is a good place to start because most of our body is made from it, really. If you sort of analyzed the little components, the atomic components of your body, you're about 2/3 water. Well, that's water vapor that was floating around in the clouds and just fell out of the air at some point, and then you eventually drank it or ate it. And then the carbon part of your body, maybe about 1/5 of it, let's say, of your body is carbon atoms. That was carbon dioxide that came out of the air into plants, went through the food chains, ended up on your dinner plate, and then is literally becoming you. So you can kind of see that, when you event away, you're going to return to the atmosphere as well, almost like this spirit of atoms drifting off into the air in the form of CO2 and water.
So I guess what I'm very curious about is, because what you're describing is, you say, it sounds like, and you've said in some of your articles that even just the water component of your body is inanimate, and so really technically most of your body is dead. So how do you understand life?
Yeah, I wish I totally understood it. That's part of the problem. We're made of these dead things. We're made of air, water, and dirt, and yet we're us. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. I'm not even sure the human mind is meant to grasp it all. But one thing I try to do to get a hold of this is think like a musician, which I also am, and try to think of it in terms of music. What is life? It's almost like, music is a bunch of sounds, right? Little noises and sound waves you make in the air. And if it's just random, you don't think much of it. But if you arrange it in a certain way, it becomes a melody, a recognizable melody that can evoke feelings and transmit, things to other people. So I kind of feel almost like we're that same way, where our inanimate kind of random jumbling atoms work together almost like a band making music together that is what we are.
An orchestra of millions and millions and millions and millions of instruments.
Yeah, yeah. It's easier to say what it's like than to say what life is, really.
Mm, right. So, in terms of, and having this atomic understanding of yourself, how does it change the way that you live day to day?
Well, one thing that happens is if you think of us as social animals, social primates, we evolved because we know how to interact with each other and we work well in groups, a lot of the time anyway. So one of the important things that affects how we interact with each other and where we live is if we feel a connection to it. If you feel like you're kin, you treat somebody differently. If a place is your home and you're a part of it, you take better care of it, or you just treat it differently from a strange place. And so I feel like there's an important emotional, almost primal result of seeing that science can demonstrate that we are physically connected to every other living person on the planet, every other species, and to the Earth itself. We're literally elementally kin. And so I think if you can let that sink in any way you can, whether it's with nerdy science like I like to do or other ways, I think it builds up into this sort of it sort of changes who you are and what you think your place in the world is. And today, with the world so crowded with people, our technology so powerful, and with us being so connected, the way we think and act and live our lives is almost geological in scope. And we become a force of nature. So I think this kind of thing's fun. Think about breathing the air that dinosaurs breathed or Leonardo da Vinci breathed. But it's also really important to be able to let that sink in and see what it means.
Well, I love that phrase, elementally kin. We're gonna take a break. We'll be right back in a moment after this quick excerpt from Live Studio on BTR TV featuring Ages and Ages. We'll be right back.
I was born out of some malleable pose. I had sworn to never end up in again. As it turns out now, I know that I was wrong. Still I see more.
I'm back with Kurt Steger talking about our atomic lives on Earth. So, Kurt, an important part of this whole thing, right, is the idea that the Earth has a finite number of atoms in it, which is something that we all kind of take for granted and don't really think about. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. If you look at an image of the Earth from space, you can see how thin the atmosphere really is. It's just this tiny little skin on the grape, basically. And so it really is different from how it feels to us when we're walking around and the sky looks so big and everything. How could we possibly affect that with our tailpipes and smokestacks and things like that? But if you look on the planetary scale, which we can now do with modern technology, it really becomes clear that the old saying, what goes around comes around, is true. When you release something into the air, pollutant or anything like that, it basically is atoms joining the pool of atoms that keeps you and me and everybody we care about alive. It doesn't go away. There's no such place as away. When it blows downwind, it's still on the Earth, still in the atmosphere, and it goes around. And basically, anything you release into the atmosphere, your breath or a fossil fuel emission, mixes completely through the hemisphere that you're in, the atmosphere of the hemisphere that you're in, within about 2 months, and is all over the planet within about a year.
God, that's absolutely shocking. That's
amazing. That's, to me, writing the book has been a personal journey to be able to put numbers on these and put the science under the things that we sort of know intuitively. That's the real power that basically I feel actually really excited to be talking about this to my students too. People college age in their 20s and such are the first generation to really have a chance to get this.
Do you think with ongoing space exploration probably will pick up at some point in the future, eventually down the line, hopefully, do you think it'll just further reinforce this sense going forward?
Yeah, I think the way we visualize the world we live in is critically important to how we understand it. So the more we see pictures of this place just floating like a little blue dot in the gigantic cosmos, which is mostly devoid of life, maybe totally, who knows, but it's certainly mostly devoid of life, makes this place all the more precious. And then it's like, well, gosh, the Earth looks small. Why in the world would we want to poison it with our waste when it's, practical to take care of it?
That's something that astronauts coming back to Earth often talk about, right? Is this sense of affection for it and realizing exactly what you're talking about. One other thing that totally blew my mind when I read it in an article you published recently in Wired is this idea that you can actually track the atmospheric composition and it actually reflects the breathing patterns of a human being or similarly.
Yeah, it's amazing, really, because this is not a new thing about polluting the atmosphere, or you could say affecting the atmosphere. The whole reason there's oxygen in the air for us to breathe is because plants and plankton have been doing this for billions of years, releasing oxygen into the air, O2. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So the more active the plants are, which is in the summer months, let's say in your hemisphere, the more oxygen they're releasing, and it actually changes the chemistry of the atmosphere, you'd say, in a positive way. And then in the winter, when they shut down, they're making less. And so scientists like Ralph Keeling, I was mentioning, in La Jolla, California, measures this. He goes out, takes a sample of air through the year all over the world, and you can actually watch. It's almost like pulsations of oxygen going up and down, almost as if the seasons are making the planet breathe through the plants.
God, this is wild. So do you subscribe to the idea, do you think of the world as a living organism in and of itself, in its entirety, like the Gaia theory?
Yeah, that's appealing on an emotional level to think of the Earth as a living organism, but I try to avoid that because I feel like it doesn't exactly fit, first of all, and it kind of makes you feel like, well, it's alive, so that's all we need to know about it. But I think we need to get down to the nitty-gritty, down on the atomic level of the chemistry, the physics, the biology, all this stuff, to really figure out how it really works for the first time in human history. And I feel like sometimes those kinds of stories, like the Gaia thing, can sometimes be a distraction.
And so you're saying you don't need that idea of the world as a sort of mega organism in and of itself to feel a sense of responsibility towards it as a home where everything is still absolutely interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I sometimes play with those kinds of ideas, and I think there is a place for it in our culture, but I prefer to get down to that really hardcore stuff because it really blows your mind when you really get it.
So is there anything, before we wrap up, is there anything right now that you're particularly excited about, either in research or another thing on your radar now that you've wrapped up this book? What's next?
Well, I feel like I'm trying to get to know where we go from here. With the climate change thing going on, basically we're entering this new epoch of Earth history. People are calling it the Anthropocene epoch, where humans are a dominant force of nature now. And I teach here at this small college, and I see this new generation of young people coming up, and I'm really, really inspired. And I want to know more about what they can do and how I can sort of empower them to do the right stuff in this planet that we're leaving to them. So I kind of feel like that's a really important mission, maybe to help people realize how important you guys are now. That basically the decisions we make in the next few decades are going to affect the Earth for tens of thousands of years. So the sooner you realize this, the faster you can rise to the challenge, and I think it's an amazing time to be alive.
Wow. Well, I love that you're so optimistic about it and that you actually are inspired by younger generations and seem to have faith in them caring about this going forward. So that's a lovely note to end on. Thank you very much, Kurt, for joining me. We'll be right back again in a quick moment after another excerpt from Live Studio featuring Peter Matthew Bauer. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and you're watching Breakthrough News on BTR Today. Be sure to check out breakthroughradio.com through the weekend for our continued New Year's week coverage, including a look at how to purge some of those unwanted holiday presents. That's it for us here at Breakthrough News. Tell us what's breaking through your world on Twitter at Breakthrough Radio. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and thank you for joining us.